and all our groups were coming into town, and a minister named Jim Woodford had a chapel right at the edge of the Fisk campus. And he said, well, you can use our social room for your conference. So I was busily typing up in Nashville, typing up this new agenda to change everything when Eldridge Cleaver was picked up at the airport and brought to the apartment. And because of a snowstorm, nobody else, none of our other guests could get to Nashville that weekend. So he actually turned out to be the only speaker. And the conference was held in one room. So it was all the students and all the SNCC people and Eldridge in this one room in Nashville. And it was quite amazing, and it was exciting, and I loved it. And what I didn't realize, because I was just so focused in on the conference, that Eldridge Cleaver was in love with me. He said it was at love at first sight. Well, I don't even believe those things happen, so I couldn't process that. But he kept asking me to do things for him and come here and get him, and I would do it, and then I'd leave. And then I need a room to work quietly. Oh, here's the key to this room. And then I'd give it to him. He wasn't interested. So the conference ends, everyone leaves. I'm still there because I'm going to coordinate a fundraiser for SNCC in Nashville. And he says, can I help you? I said, yeah, actually, I needed, to go places and drive around. And so he said, I have a car. So he was driving me around. And I'm thinking he's just trying to help me. He's trying to get my attention. And I'm so naive, I didn't realize that. And then I said, okay, I've done everything for the conference. I have to go back to Atlanta. And he was not real pleased with that. And he actually said, well, how are you going to go? And I said, well, I'm not sure. Fred Brooks is going to arrange it. And he said, well, I have a car. So Fred Brooks, who was a student, didn't have a car. So it turns out Eldridge provides us a car, which includes him. And so we all go to Atlanta to, I think Fred Brooks and his assistants needed to use our printing press. And we had presses where we could print up leaflets and things. So Eldridge and I ride in the car, Fred's driving, and we get to Atlanta, and the apartment I'm staying in is empty because the other people are campus traveling. And so we could stay in our apartment, and I think we played a chess game, which is what I just learned how to do, and I was very excited about chess. I didn't know convicts spent hours and hours playing chess. I had no idea. And somehow or other, I'm a novice, but I had a very good teacher. I beat him. Checkmate. And he looked up. I don't know if he went to sleep or he just deliberately was tricking me. So once I checkmated him, then it was okay. We were attracted to each other, and we fell in love. So then I was just very entranced by him. He's extremely good-looking, but a bit intimidating, kind of the size of Muhammad Ali, but not a friendly-looking person because he spent 9 years in prison. So he had something they call a mask, and very little expression. But he was the most unusual grown man I'd met because he'd been out of circulation for so long. He thought, oh, a laundromat was amazing. He was very childish in certain ways, and he was extremely intellectual and verbal, but not very mature. And it was a very odd combination. And he was drawn to me. One of his friends said he could see why. His friend said that I looked like Eldridge's mother. I mean, I had light eyes and light hair, and it was a small person. I don't know. Anyway, we fell in love. It was mad. And then he went back to Nashville, and the consequences of other things that were happening ended up, there was a student riot, there was a tax, there was all kinds of things happening, and his parole authority in California said he had to come back. So he flew back to California. I had to be a bridesmaid in a wedding of a friend. I flew to Washington, D.C. to be in this wedding, and we stayed in touch by letter. So I was in Atlanta working in the campus program, and we had something called a Watts line, and you could call internationally. So we'd talk on the phone and write, and he wanted me to come visit him. So people in SNCC knew that we were interested in each other, but they weren't that thrilled about it. So I went out to visit him in the summer, and after we had a summer project in Mississippi at Tougaloo, and this was a summer project to train students to work in Mississippi. And the papers we did at the conference were my next assignment. I had to type up all the papers, and we'd have like a little book for Black Power. And so I went to visit him, and as soon as I got there, he proposed to marry me. So we got engaged immediately, and then I came back to Atlanta, and I was working in my, doing campus program secretary work. And in October of 1967, very suddenly, Huey Newton, who was the man who had started a small organization called the Black Panther Party for self-defense, he had been in touch with people in Lowndes County and SNCC because when he and Bobby Seale created this group, they were Merritt College students, and they created a black organization, and they had a platform and program, 10 points, what we want, 10 points of what we believe, similar to the Nation of Islam, but different points. And the first one was we want power to determine the destiny of our own black community. Therefore, it's one of the first cadre groups to form on the principles of black power. And Eldridge was a part of it, but it was undercover because he was on parole. So he was a secret member. Stokely Carmichael had visited them in California, and he said, he was so excited. He said, they're the first group to have a cadre organization based on black power. And he had been given a scroll, and it said, they had drafted Stokely Carmichael as the field marshal for the Black Panther Party for self-defense east of the Mississippi. The name Black Panther Party came from a project in Lowndes County that SNCC and Stokely were very closely identified, electoral politics to run a third party for black people, and that party was called the Black Panther Party. But the group in California was not interested in electoral politics, so they said, we're not for electoral politics, we're the Black Panther Party for self-defense. And it was an armed group following the principles of Robert Williams in North Carolina, who was a civil rights activist. He'd been in the NAACP, and he was also an ex-Marine. His principle was this: if a white man who is convinced he is superior to you has to confront you and you're armed, then he has to think whether he wants to risk his superior white life to take your inferior black life. And Robert Williams' principle was that that will reduce violence. So that was logical, made sense. The Panthers accepted it, I accepted it, and many people in SNCC also acknowledged that. So by November, this episode had happened. Huey Newton, who had started this Black Panther Party for self-defense in California, along with Bobby Seale, who was a veteran. Huey was a law student, but they met in college, ended up in a shootout at dawn with an Oakland policeman named John Fry, who stopped his car and said, oh, so you're the great Huey Newton. And they got into a tussle and ended up having a shooting. Fry ended up dead. Huey ended up wounded. Huey was arrested, and he was taken to jail and charged with murdering a policeman, which is a death penalty offense. Eldridge was a secret member of the Black Panther Party because convicts cannot be associated with people who carry weapons. And he said, you gotta come out here and help me. And he took the position that saving the life of Huey Newton was more important than his staying off parole. But the party had collapsed. They had no office, they had no money, other things had led to the disintegration. So there was really Eldridge, Cleaver, and maybe 4 teenagers and maybe one person over 19. That was all that was left at that moment. And he said, you gotta come out here and help me. And so I didn't have any money, but by the time, I went out there in November, and since we were engaged, we got married in December, and the people in the Black Panther Party who didn't really know me because I came from Atlanta, they called me Eldridge Cleaver's lady friend. But I became, based on my attraction to SNCC and knowing what Julian Bond had done, when we had to organize, and I said, well, if Huey's life is in danger and he's in the jail, we should have demonstrations. We should call people together and have demonstrations outside the courthouse. But we have to call the press, and I learned this in SNCC, because if they're going to attack us, then there'll be a witness. So I knew how to draft a press release because I had observed what Julian Bond did, and I admired him immensely. So I wrote out a press release to announce that there was going to be a demonstration in front of the Alameda County Courthouse on such and such a date to challenge the arrest and Huey Newton, and I had to identify who sent it. So at that point I wrote Kathleen Neal, Communications Secretary, Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. And I took communications secretary based on Julian Bond, who was the communications director of SNCC. And we had been taught that you need the press to help protect you from the violence of people who oppose you.